All right, with me now, he is the VP of Campus for Young Americans for Liberty. His name is Dan Taylor. Dan, are you ready to roar?
Oh yeah, I'm so glad to be on here. Thanks, Mark.
Sure thing, brother. So, we're going to talk a little bit today about, well, not just YAL, but this upcoming event that I'm going to be a part of called YAL Revolution next month. Very excited about that. First, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So, why don't you just get into a little bit of your history? How did you first kind of get into just politics, the ideas of liberty in general, and take us through your involvement of YAL and, whatever twists and turns may come up in between?
Yeah. So I originally became a libertarian back in high school. My dad was kind of a big supporter of the old Tea Party wave, so I was originally a big Tea Partier, but then started getting more into anti-war stuff as well as obviously criminal justice reform because my dad was just the staunch conservative in a sense. And originally, Milton Friedman got me down that path, which got me to Ron Paul, which turned me anti-war and turned me from just the free market conservative to the actual libertarian. In or not high school. After that, went into college actually as a biomed major. So I was looking to become a doctor. I had all sorts of credits and internships built up around biomed, but got involved in, or actually started my YAL chapter. I started growing that up, got super involved in YAL at the state level, becoming the state chair, and eventually got a job offer to ship out of small town Indiana where I lived and work in Washington, D.C. for this crazy organization called Young Americans for Liberty. So I just dropped out, joined the crazy libertarian kids on the block essentially in D.C. Worked there for a few years and moved up from full time as the regional director to the national campus director, now to the vice president of campus, where we're kind of overseeing all the student programs, revolution, returning students' rights, as well as getting people onto our Operation Win the Door campaign. So it's been a wild ride, and it all just kind of started off from the leap of faith of jumping away from a sound and safe career in medicine into the wild, rambunctious, and ever changing life livelihood really of living in the liberty movement and trying to make a living in state principles. So that's where we're at now, and we're just kind of fighting back every chance we get. Yale's been growing like crazy the past few years too. So that's kind of how I got here.
Those are certainly very different paths that you could have gone down there. One aspect of your story I find really fascinating here is that here you are, the VP of campus for YAL, an organization that works with I think largely students and young people, and but you dropped out of college to take this position. So can you kind of get into a little bit what was behind that decision? Why you decided, like, you know what, I don't actually need to sit here and spend this money for 4 years and get this degree. I'm already sort of doing something I want to do. So was that a difficult decision for you to actually just drop out of college as something that I don't know how much time and I guess you hadn't, gone through the 4 years yet. So hopefully, luckily it wasn't all of that time and investment, but I'm sure you had some sort of pushback from maybe family members or friends or that sort of thing. So can you kind of walk me through a little bit of what went on with you upon making that decision?
Oh yeah, everyone thought I was a nut, and so did I. It was one of those things where it was the second I got the email telling me they wanted to hire me, it was a split decision where it's like, yeah, I'm jumping all in on this because I never realized up until that second I didn't realize there was a real world opportunity to make an impact for liberty in politics. I thought that was impossible. So it was one of those things where I didn't even consider it, and then the second it happened, I jumped all in. And before that. Um, it was extremely scary. I mean, dropping out of college, first of all, my dad's a doctor, so he kind of expected the same path for me. And one thing that kind of led me to the point in which I was radicalized enough to jump away from a very sound and career inside of medicine and whatever else was actually my cousin. So my cousin had at that time just passed away from brain cancer.
Wow.
And she had it for the previous 3 years or so, and I just saw the horrible results of just kind of living with that type of cancer forever. And it's one of those things where you have a very short window of time in which it's possible to recover from, and if you don't get past that, then essentially it's just about quality of life from then on. And it's a glioblastoma on the outside of the tissue of the brain, which is one of the very few types of cancer in which marijuana can actually help, because marijuana limits the growth of additional blood cells to the brain. So the whole, marijuana kills brain cells type of theory is actually kind of incorrect. It kills the ability to grow new veins, but once your brain's fully developed at 25, it doesn't really make a difference because you're not growing new brain cells unless you have a tumor, a glioblastoma in which
Yeah.
brain cells are growing when they shouldn't be on the exterior of the brain. So that's the type she had. And I just remember talking about, or I just remember from my family in the sense of all these really staunch conservatives, and then we're in very conservative Indiana. And she had no access to one of the few types of medications that actually worked on this. She actually had the brain cancer when she was 2, and used radiation therapy. And the doctors, when she was 30, when she actually got brain cancer again, recognized that the radiation that she got when she was 2 caused the brain cancer now.
Oh, wow.
So essentially, you're fighting a treatment which was for the previous cancer, and you're not allowed to get to the treatment which could cure this cancer, which does not have the risk of causing an additional cancer. That was one of the big things that kind of woke me up from this conservative, we need to control culture or whatever else. It's, the government was legitimately preventing treatment. And that's something that kind of really woke me up. And it
Like it was
also,
just due to the regulations. It's not something that she
yeah,
could get, or was it a financial thing? Or
no, it's illegal to have any type of possession of marijuana, especially at that time in
okay.
Indiana. So it was impossible to get the treatment. Uh, yeah. So that's, or impossible, I should say, to
I'm so
legally get the
used to,
treatment.
I lived in California since 2002. Like the idea of pot even being remotely hard to get is still so foreign to me.
Yeah, yeah. So that's funny. And now, of course, you can get just weed, but that's not exactly,
Right.
you can buy it on the street corner. But that's not exactly what you want
Yeah.
in terms of the type of treatment and, the quality and refinery when you're
Mhm.
trying to dose yourself
Sure.
in such a situation. So that was one of the things where it really woke me up, because I was at that point thinking about becoming an oncologist, focusing on cancer. I wrote some papers on cancer when I was doing like early biology research. But that was at the point where it's like, man, if I can't even treat my patients, what am I doing here? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people over the course of Obamacare recognized the effectiveness of being a doctor dropped dramatically. The cost of being a doctor dropped or increased to an incredible degree. And it's just the government intervention, the whole thing. So that's what kind of really radicalized me to the point of like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. It's time to fight the bigger fight, which I think is hurting far more people. In the case of just the government itself, start to tear down the state and allow the free market and voluntarism to kind of provide or come through from there.
And how's that decision look like? Whatever it is now, 4 or 5 years later.
Well, it's looking good now. Now I live in Texas.
All
Our,
right. A lot
yeah,
better than
our,
DC. I was gonna say I don't think I could handle that
oh
much
yeah.
time in
Oh my
DC.
gosh. Yeah. Nope. I don't think I'd still be working in politics if we still lived in DC. So thank God, America's slowly moved their HQ down to Texas, in Austin. Now I'm married to my wife. We are just had our first child, and we are
Congrats.
growing like crazy. So we have a financial way and path to, oh, thank you, by the way. And, to just live our lives. And while we continue to fight back against the state, which is kind of what we're doing with Operation With the Door and organizing our students to reclaim their rights on the college campuses.
Can you dig into, just for people that aren't as aware of what YAL does? What is actually the day to day mission of YAL? How do you guys decide where you're going to focus energy? What do you guys actually do on campuses, and then how does that translate to what happens with Operation Win at the Door and helping candidates get elected?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, our mission statement is to identify, educate, train, and mobilize students to make liberty win. So, our core is kind of with the students on our campus. We organize students and to build up chapters and groups to spread the ideas of liberty. One program that is really helping grow that is our Students' Rights Campaign, which essentially is helping them organize, use a lot of Saul Alinsky rules for radical style tactics to organize students to be mad at a policy that is restricting their freedom. A lot of this was birthed right out of COVID, because of all the just insane policies that started popping up on campus. And this is a great way to organize students because, for example, our first SRC win was about geolocation Bluetooth tracking. So the campus enforced everybody to have an app on their phone in which and the Bluetooth had to be on. And anytime you're walking by other students, it was collecting metadata of every single person you were interacting with. And you also had a mandatory twice COVID test a week. You could get locked out of the doors because you had to use that app to get into your buildings to go to your classes. So there were people who would be locked out of their classes because they were connected to somebody who had tested positive for COVID that they passed or whatever else that the Bluetooth connected with through the
That they could
metadata.
have just been
So
near for
we
like sort of walk by for a few minutes, and that would be enough to lock them out.
yeah. Yeah, if the data suggested they were a threat of having COVID, then you get locked out of your classes, regardless if you're feeling symptoms, regardless if you had COVID in the past, or any of those
If
types
the
of things
data
in which
suggested
natural
it,
immunity kicks in.
that is crazy.
The data suggested might be a fantastic coin for the past 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
um, Yeah, so we organized a bunch of students around that. They collected petitions. They hosted rallies. They went to their school and said, "So look, here's hundreds of students." I think they collected over 1,000 or 1,500 petition signatures on this campus that say, "Look, we don't want this anymore. This is tyranny," and eventually forced the hand of the administration to remove that policy. So we've been doing that, and we've been doing that with free speech for several years. And we just started to push that onto the other policies, such as COVID tyranny, and now onto gun rights, now even onto excessive fees, just to get the students to force the change, because like all these students are just living on socialist indoctrination camps. I think that's just that is the world, and there's so many of these liberty-minded people, or just maybe students who are past conservatives who are becoming more liberty-minded because of the past 2 years, and they are just essentially going along to get along and shutting up to get the grade. But I think they're getting tired of that, and recognizing that they have power by organizing these chapters and forcing the hand of their administration to give them back some of their rights. I mean, they don't have any guaranteed rights on these campuses, even the public education systems in which they should, right? Free speech, for example, right to privacy over the COVID stuff, the unbiased reporting systems in which any student can just anonymously report somebody for any type of infraction, and sometimes without any trial, sometimes without any type of investigation or anything. You can get in trouble. You can get expelled. You can get suspended. You can have other forms of you might have to take some HR trainings or whatever else because some random person said, some anonymous person accused you of a crime that you didn't do. So these students don't have the rights, and we need to start organizing students. So that's what we're doing on college campuses. And then we are trying to get students onto campaigns through Operation with the Door, which is when we, take these students who are radicalized, whatever else, get them onto a campaign of a liberty-minded legislator, having them go out, knock doors, hit the pavement, and for the last 30 days of the election, knocking every aligned voter's door 3 times to get them to show up. And we have data that shows that we can increase turnout 11 to 13%, depending on the election. Which can totally swing elections. There's a lot of liberty people that exist on these ballots that never get the money, never get the support that they needed. Now we're starting to build that coalition, and our coalition of the legislators that we've gotten elected is up to 231 people now, and they've passed just this year 166 aligned liberty bills, and last year it was like 122. So that's
When you
that's
say
kind of
that
the full
you've
scope of what
gotten
we do.
when you say you've gotten elected, are those
Yep.
just candidates that you supported that got elected, or are those specifically candidates where you can say like the door knocking operation could like we can say likely made that difference?
Gotcha. So closer to the first one is candidates in which we put the students on the ground to knock the doors to increase the turnout for their election 11 to 13%.
Gotcha, gotcha. I'm
So
curious.
in
Have you
most of these
seen?
elections, I was just going to say 3/4 of those elections are within 5 percentage points. So we can tell you that, like, for the most part, those are people that would not have won without our support.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. I'm curious just as far as campus goes and y'all recruitment on campus or how you're connecting with students. Have you seen? I know you kind of mentioned some of the policies of the last couple of years, but especially even when it comes to private policies, depending on how much you want to call any American college private, with all these vaccine mandates that are coming in. Have you seen an interest not just in YAL the organization, but have you seen? Has this caused more students to rethink just their ideology? Have you seen more people thinking in a more liberty minded way due to their reaction to these policies that are coming down on campus, which are obviously coming from a much higher place than just their dean or wherever it may be?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's even happening in America at wide. I was if we look at the political parties themselves, they're starting to shift on the political compass. For the first time in 20, 40, I mean, however many years, probably since Vietnam, the Republican Party is starting to become more anti-war than it was, and which is really unique and crazy. And also, they don't care nearly as much about the drug war anymore. As well as you look at the Democrats, they're starting to go up and to the left on the compass. They are thinking that the government should be involved in all sorts of medical and healthcare decisions, which is really ironic compared to the past. And they're getting even more aggressive on gun control. They're getting even more aggressive on the concept of the government has a right to shut down things in crisis. So people in general are becoming more radicalized to different poles, which I think is just a natural realignment of the political compass. When there was less tyranny and there was less, I'm going to use the times of crisis, but really I mean government forced crisis, right? The people could be this wishy-washy, more, less, more hypocritical version of Republican and Democrat. But I think it's trying to radicalize people towards the poles of the political compass through the past few years, which is really good for radicals, for people like us to make real change. It's a great opportunity. On college campuses, this is happening too. And I think it's even turning these kids into radicals. So, like, for example, our chapter at South Dakota School of Mines collected petitions from a quarter of their students on their campus, demanding that they have the right to open carry and concealed carry on their college campus. So we essentially are having these rallies, and they've had a rally of over 100 students showing up to the dean's office or whatever else to deliver these petitions and demand that they have a right to defend themselves on campus, which is crazy in the sense of, think about how many schools are gun-free zones, and they're demanding that they can open carry AR-15s. And I think that's really the way we need to drive the Overton window in the narrative, because if anything, they'll at least get the right to conceal carry.
I'm curious, you know, I'm sure you're aware there was recently some moves in the Libertarian Party where
Yes.
the Mises Caucus took over, and now they definitely have some better messaging and that sort of thing. I would say for now, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe primarily over the years, YAL has supported Republican candidates, not because necessarily you like Republicans better, but because, like you said, you're going into races where the candidate has a close enough chance to win that you can make the difference. I know that you guys did help Jeff Hewitt, and he did win his seat. Of course, that was a non back when I was California. I mean, he's a great guy. So it's not like you are opposed to working with third parties when appropriate. So I guess I'm just wondering if you see any hope that this new sort of Libertarian Party could become an organization where you might identify candidates to work with directly. Again, not necessarily because the ideology is better, but because, do you think that there's a chance that this new takeover of the Libertarian Party could enhance their candidates in a way that you might deem them worthy of support, worthy in the sense that you could make a difference?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. It's something that I think is we're keeping a really close eye on, because it'll be, if nothing, it'll be interesting, right?
Right.
To kind of see where these things go. I think the biggest value that is being added with these changes is the fact that there is at least a microphone for the Ron Paul message. I think there was a massive missed opportunity in 2016. When we finally have Libertarian Party members being interviewed by national news or whatever else, and then they say something along the lines of, well, Hillary Clinton was a good and faithful servant. Like that is the opposite when you finally get the microphone of the things that you should be saying. When we have the Libertarian Party, we shouldn't be hiding from our principles. We need the core. When we're endorsing candidates, we're looking at two things. That's principle and viability. So principle being, are they, I think is the most important one, right? This is all for a waste if we're sending people in there and they're just becoming Lindsey Graham, or they're becoming, very bad, squishy people. And that does happen. It probably happens less than you think, because we have a lot of systems in place to hold people accountable. But it does happen, and when we do, we kick them out, we make a public show of it, and we try to hurt them as much as we can on the way out. The other one is viability. So do they actually have a chance at winning? And we have endorsed libertarians. I think we've endorsed maybe 6 over the years that are in extreme circumstances in which they can win. The biggest thing I think is we just need, and as a liberty movement as a whole, to get away from parties as a whole. There should be no loyalty to anything but liberty, right? And that means loyalty to the Libertarian Party. And some people have strong loyalty to the Libertarian Party. I think it's shooting them in the foot. Now, I also think it's important to have that message, have that strong Ron Paul message out there, and an opportunity for people to hear it. So, in which case, I'm really excited to kind of see where that goes. And we have won libertarians. You mentioned Hewitt, for example, even though it wasn't the state level, through Operation with the Door. Marshall Burt, it's either John Burt or Marshall Burt. I'm sorry, we won 2 Burt elections, and I always mix them up. But he was a libertarian proper candidate. He's currently the highest elected libertarian in the United States. So, point being is, I don't have a hard answer to see if they're going to be more viable or not. But I think if anything, there's going to be a strong microphone for when those opportunities do arise, where the 2 candidates are so awful nobody wants to vote for them, like we saw in 2016. And in that opportunity, we're going to have the chance to give a real strong principled message, not one that makes us look like a laughing stock.
What has y'all's relationship been with, like, say, the more establishment Republicans in certain areas? Are there areas where they see you guys come in and say, well, we were already kind of okay with this guy winning, so you guys are fine? Or are there other times where you come in and you're really are upsetting the apple cart, really are maybe supporting a candidate that was less establishment, or not approved by the local establishment, where they actually say, all right, these y'all guys are a problem?
Oh, they hate us. They absolutely hate us. And this year, we're a bigger thorn in many of their sides than the Democrats are, and we're seen as the number 1 threat. Except for New Hampshire. We'll talk about New Hampshire here in a second. It's a different story altogether. But for Indiana, for example, we had our legislator, Kurt Nisley, absolute hardcore Ron Pauler. I'll defend him, every day of the week, twice on Sundays. So he has been proposing constitutional carry for 6 years, and he was in there alone before Operation Went the Door. In 2020, we came in and defended him because of all these bills that he's been pushing through, and got him the support he needed. We got him an additional 4 more Liberty legislators. So it used to just be him, and he couldn't even get a vote on constitutional carry because in Indiana you need to have a second. So he put constitutional carry up, and he couldn't get a second to get the vote. Which was the situation we're in. So we go in there, we add the 4 more Liberty legislators, they get the second, they get the roll call vote. The important thing about that is 90% of these bad or good bills get killed before they ever have a vote. And that's the goal of the establishment, is they don't want to take a hard stance on these radical bills like constitutional carry, because they don't want to have to go back to their constituents in the next 2 years or so and have to say, I voted against a pro 2A bill. They want that 100% 2A voting record, right? And to have that 100% 2A voting record, all those votes have to be really squishy, do nothing 2A bills, because they don't want to upset the moderates either. So, most of these games that are played with the establishment is killing the bills before they can do anything and before you can get a vote on them. So we finally got to force the vote, and we spent we put a ton of students on the ground knocking doors, telling people about this bill to call their legislator, doing phone banking, patch through calls, essentially calling voters, say, hey, a constitutional carry is on the bill. Tell your legislator support this pro 2A bill. We patch them directly through, and they'd call their legislator office. All sorts of lobbying like that, getting, 19, 18, 20-year-olds involved to, pass constitutional carry, which is awesome. Finally gets passed through. On top of that, this is in the middle of COVID years. Kurt Knisely proposed 3 different bills to remove the executive power of Eric Holcomb, essentially embarrassing the governor. Through this next election cycle, he just lost his primary because between 2 of our legislators of the 5, they dropped over $1 million in these elections. So Kurt Knisely only put $60,000 into his election from the money he raised. They put over $500,000. They outspent him almost 10 to 1. And they outspent another one of our legislators that was beside Knisely 20 to 1. So they were very mad. Both those people got unelected, but they spent so much of their resources for the primary war chest that we got another 3 people elected. So our Hazlitt coalition grew, even though they knocked 2 of us out. But at the same time, we made them spend $2 million on our candidates because they saw us as a bigger threat than the Democrats this year. So we are starting to see this. We are starting to get attention to it, and we should expect that. So in the future, Operation Went the Door is going to have to become the sword and shield of our policy. Essentially, policy is going to come first. What bills are we passing? What bills do we need to pass? And then in the electoral season, defend the ones that stuck their neck out against the establishment, and then use the sword to chop off the heads that try to kill us or kill our bills in the previous election year. And the goal is to become better, stronger, more principled, and net each year, and defend the people that stick their necks out.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like speaks to something I was wondering, like how much I know you guys go out and support candidates to get them over the top. How much do you then go out and do you ever go after candidates who have either just gone against you guys so hard or against liberty in a certain area so hard? Or like you had mentioned earlier, perhaps you said there were some situations where you had to keep yourselves accountable and somebody maybe didn't live up to their promises or their liberty cred, whatever it may be. Can you point out a situation where you've had to go back and say, like, we shouldn't have supported this person, or this person kind of maybe we thought we should support them at the time, but they went back against what they said, and now like what sort of way do you go after people like that and make their lives miserable or whatever it may be?
That's the fun part, right? So, and that's great, and that's very true. You need the sword and the shield. So, in our grassroots action trainings, when we're training people on kind of the ideas of grassroots lobbying, applying pressure, using the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals tactics to apply that social change. One of the quotes we have is, from Pablo Escobar. You're in Mexico, so you're gonna know this better than I will. Plutos or platos, essentially silver or lead, right? So that's the way that we need to treat all legislators, not just YAL, but the movement as a whole. If they're doing good things, and doing good things is very hard in the legislature. Doing good things put the target on your back, essentially. But if you're doing
Sure.
good things, supporting liberty, and doing the radical thing of proposing hard bills, which is a lot of the problem. So there's actually probably more legislators with a good voting record, air quotes there for those who are on audio, a good voting record, meaning they vote right every time they do vote. But the problem is there's no bills that are coming up that would actually put a target on their head. So there's a few of those champions out there, a few liberty champions that are actually in the legislature that need to propose these hard bills, these radical bills that will put a target on their back. And that's hard to find. So when that happens, you need to defend them. You need to work for that, or support them however you can. Donations, volunteering, Operation Went the Door. And we need to protect those people because they're very rare. And if you allow your champion to go out there, propose a radical bill, bill gets killed, and then the next electoral season they get wiped out. They're now a message to every other person who might have proposed hard bills. It's going to be even harder to pass your bills. So those champions are so precious and very rare. The other side of that is the lead, right? So in the sense of when somebody says they're going to do something when they get elected and they don't do that, then it is your first responsibility to take those people out before you take out anybody else. Really,
You've now betrayed the family. So
exactly, and they betrayed the liberty movement as a whole. And when they do that, they are showing to the other people that, hey, look, you can play the games with the establishment and not get hurt, and that's a problem. So, for example, Stuart Jones, we got elected in 2018 in South Carolina. He's kind of our number one go-to because a lot of people, I think, he's a really good example of exemplifying this issue of people who believe in liberty, air quotes again, but vote a different way. Squishes essentially, right? When the pressure comes, they're going to squish to the establishment and keep their head low. He is somebody that has Hayek inside his office in the South Carolina Capitol. He's somebody who's a self-professed libertarian or whatever else. So it's like when you see these people, when they start to run and they don't have a voting record, you think, oh, he's going to be awesome. He's like a hardcore libertarian. He openly quotes Hayek and Rothbard and all that type of stuff. But then what happened was we had a student training. We had him speak, and he was telling all our students and or whatever else when we were planning on running with constitutional carry that constitutional carry was too radical for the all Republican legislature of South Carolina with Republican governor, right? And that we needed to go for open carry if we actually want to get this passed. And that's poison to your movement, right? He was essentially trying to nerf the bills just to the same old get along, go along, two-way bills that we've seen with all the other legislatures to keep a target off his back, and he wasn't willing to propose that bill. His other Hazlitt legislator, R.J. May, and Jonathan Hill, two champions, again, that we helped get elected with him in the previous electoral cycle, went ahead, pushed constitutional carry, but he helped kill it, and he helped try to push along open carry, which eventually, of course, got killed. So all of this was just kind of a diversion. So after that, we openly kicked him out of the Hazlitt Coalition. Every single time we do a training opportunity, we talk poorly about him. I'm pretty sure we sent negative mail in his district to pressure him and to hurt his chances of voting. And he's one of those people that we kind of have a target on his head now. And that's what the establishment does. When people vote one way or another, cause problems like they are with like he is for us, he's the number one target. So we're looking to get rid of him. Operation With the Door is still too early to, kind of have the biggest opportunities to try to take him out.
Is this his election year then? If that was 2018 was when he was elected, you said?
Yes, that is correct. So we'll see.
We shall see.
Yeah, we put mail in his district over the lobbying years as well, and we've become very aggressive against him, and his constituents know that as well. So we're hoping to see that hurt him in the electoral season.
Gotcha. So you do not want to turn your back on YAL, right? They will come at you with a vengeance.
Yeah, well, especially legislators, and we need that. The liberty movement isn't very good at that, to be honest. The establishment is way better about that. But now New Hampshire. 100% different story. I think everybody will agree New Hampshire is a freer state than New York or California or any other state, to be fair, although there's some other good ones. New Hampshire, we are the establishment, and it's the only state where it's like that. So we've now elected, I think we elected around half of the Republican Party, who's the majority party in there. And I'm pretty sure, unless this changed recently, I'm pretty sure Jason Osborne is the speaker, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, somebody that we endorsed in 2018 got elected, and we've been every single year getting more and more of these liberty people elected. And this is a coalition effort. So I'm not saying that we own New Hampshire. The liberty movement owns New Hampshire. And that's a big difference. But he just got kicked off Twitter for saying something along the lines of save the calories on buying hot dogs this 4th of July and buy ammo for your AK-47. You'll thank me later. So this is the type of radicalism that exists in the establishment of New Hampshire. Imagine that establishment saying that now South Carolina, Indiana, or whatever else. Just New Hampshire is a different creature in a different state. And I think it's a really great example of what the liberty movement can do in specific states to return people's freedom. It is the freest state in the nation. I think, I'm sure the Florida people will be mad about that, but it's just simply true.
So I do want to talk a little bit about this upcoming event, YAL Revolution. I will be speaking on a panel along with Reed Coverdale and Clint from Liberty Lockdown. And before we get into that kind of preview, it's kind of a hard position for me a little bit too, because I'm unbiased, and I'm biased in the sense that I'm excited to come to YAL Revolution and speak at that event. But otherwise, I'm pretty much unbiased in the sense that I just kind of observe the liberty movement, observe what goes on. So I'm sure it's you're very familiar with the accusations, I should say, that have come out about YAL, some of the controversies in the last 6 months. One of the former employees, who I'm sure you know, is Reed Cooley, has had a lot of things to say about what he has seen behind the scenes with a lot of the direction, specifically since Lauren Doherty took over. Now, I don't know Lauren. I don't know you outside of this interview. I don't really know Reed either. All I know is I see all of what's going on. So maybe you can shed some light from your perspective about some of those accusations. I think the primary, really overall accusation, and we can get into maybe some of the specifics, is really just, well, I guess it plays up to a lot of what you hear in the sort of post-libertarian dialogue right now. I don't know how much you follow this stuff, and how a lot of that criticism has been directed towards the Libertarian Party, but it's basically centered around the idea that if an organization is not explicitly right, then it will inevitably fall left or fall more to the establishment. And I think that is sort of the idea around what some people claim has been happening with YAL. So I'll let you address some specific things, but I just want to let you first, give you the chance to just, I guess, defend the organization, defend the direction of the organization against people that have claimed that YAL is either going left or going establishment or whatever it may be. And then we can get to some more of the specifics.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I appreciate, I appreciate bringing it up because I do want to have the opportunity just to like speak openly about this. I believe a lot in transparency. I mean, it's so ironic because I've heard different things. We're left, we're establishment, or whatever else. I just think it's all politics. It's all people trying to, they see success in one direction and try to cast it one direction or the other, or whatever else. Here's the thing: if we were the establishment, we wouldn't have had to, fight the establishment tooth and nail more than they're going to fight the Democrats in Indiana. We wouldn't be, championing New Hampshire as a bastion for liberty. And like anytime someone kind of brings up this accusation, I just say like, if you look at our Twitter, look at our work, right? The bills that are being passed, constitutional carry, federal gun nullification, the most radical federal bill in the United States right now. The concept that New Hampshire is not going to enforce federal gun laws with their police and their state troopers or anything like that. That's something that's incredibly radical. The fact that we're just going to start ignoring federal laws. School choice has been a massive one that started to pass in different areas. Obviously all the COVID tyranny bills that we've been attacking. So point being is just like, I'm a big actions speak louder than word, proof is in the pudding type person. If you think we're establishment, check out the Twitter, check out the Facebook page. We're always pushing very radical stuff. And on top of that, we are constantly fighting the establishment. We're going to spend far more money in the primaries than the general election this year, and that's intentional and on purpose. And the purpose behind that is to remove these establishment hacks, as well as the populists who are a big problem that are inside the Republican Party to get people elected in the general election. So, anyways, I mean, yeah, let's get into the specifics. I'm happy to talk about it openly, but I think the synthesis is I'm going to say obviously pro YAL stuff because I work here at YAL and I believe what we're doing. Other people who don't like YAL for whatever reason are going to say anti-YAL stuff. I think just figure it out for yourself. Check out what we do. Check out, and if anything, just come to Revolution. I mean, Ron Paul is speaking. You guys are speaking. Dave Smith's speaking. I mean, if you're unsure, just show up and you'll see the type of people we are.
Sure, yeah, and I think maybe framing it as establishment isn't necessarily the right frame.
Yes,
I think some of the accusations maybe speak more to kind of what you were referencing earlier, like not being so squishy with messaging and like really not being afraid to be bold and go after either certain figures or certain messages. So I'll just get out a few of the ones that I know have been talked about the most out there. Obviously, the one is that supposedly, and there are screenshots and stuff along with this. So I don't think anybody has really denied the accuracy of them as far as I'm aware. But that Lauren Doherty was concerned that there was some messaging going after Liz Cheney. I know that was like one of the first things that had come up. Maybe you can just address that, then I can look at a few other items. But I also want to walk the line here. I don't want to make you just answer a series of things for other people, but I just want to, what I want to do is try to give you the chance to assuage the concerns of others who see this sort of stuff and say, well, how can I really trust what's going on in YAL if the people this high up in the organization are more worried about, offending Liz Cheney or worried about imagery with guns more than they might be about, putting the right liberty message forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Feel free to ask any questions. I truly, I'm happy with transparency. I won't be mad about it. The Liz Cheney thing, it's all about context. We've attacked Liz Cheney countless times. We still regularly attack Liz Cheney. There's a million things to attack Liz Cheney on. War, being the establishment, COVID tyranny. But that specific post, and by the way, I'm not going to deny the accuracy of the text. Like they are texts between Lauren and Reed. One thing that's worth understanding is this is a text between the vice president of communications and the CEO of a company trying to determine the best message of the situation. We were in that post attacking Liz Cheney over her claims that the over election fraud and back and forth. So it's we focus on state level policy. We should not be trying to make massive decisions about or coming out in strong policy of, oh, the election in 2022 or 2020 was stolen from Trump. We're not Trump people, right? Our true north is Ron Paul. Left, right, those things are always moving. So I don't even think that's a good target to call yourself right or left. Now, I'm a hardcore Christian conservative, Christ-filled, liberty, Lockean, libertarian type person. So like, I totally understand the cultural right type things. But our true north is Ron Paul at the end of the day. We attack Liz Cheney all the time over the war, over, I mean, she's a hack. She's the worst. And she's constantly putting money into elections against our candidates. So she's somebody that we see on the campaign battlefield constantly. And I think she is the biggest enemy of the Republican Party right now, in the sense of, from the establishment side of things. So I don't know. Do you think does that make sense to you? In the fact that, would you agree with me that we should not be attacking Liz Cheney over over quotes about the election fraud of 2020, and we should focus on attacking her over war?
Not necessarily.
Okay, no, what's your point?
I mean,
yeah.
But from my point of view, I would be fine with attacking Liz Cheney for anything. I guess, unless it's something that's just completely innocuous, or like what flavor ice cream she eats or what have you. But perhaps as a liberty organization, I think what you're saying is like we as YAL would want to attack people over the specific liberty issues, and I'm speaking from Marc Clair, not from I'm Marc Clair liberty guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like here's the thing, right? What you're saying, I agree with you. So the concept here is, again, internal messaging. Should we attack Liz Cheney over a tweet saying that the Trump's argument over election fraud is incorrect or whatever else? I don't think so. I think we need to focus on the principal issues. Let's get back to the principal issues and not attack her for these innocuous reasons. And like, we believe in hardcore anti-war stuff. Let's attack her for being pro-war. Let's attack her for being the establishment. Let's attack her over COVID stuff. So, and we do that all the time, by the way. Like, you can scroll through our Twitter or Facebook or whatever else. We attack Liz Cheney pretty regularly. She is one of our top enemies. But so when we're having this conversation internally, which should remain internal, the question is, how do we attack someone, and what is the best message to kind of go about that? But it's not a weak messaging. We attack her very regular. I think she's a war criminal, right? I think she should be somebody who's in jail. But that's not weak messaging. That's just how we target people, so we can focus on the issues in which we actually care about. I think a lot of times we can get confused between how we attack people. Now, at the same time, ugly pictures, whatever else, can be utilized, as long as we're focusing on the liberty message and not focusing on some of the other culture war stuff.
And I'm not going to go down a list of every single, screenshot or text or anything. I'm just going to bring up one other one that I think is another one that would rub a lot of people the wrong way. And again, it might not be necessarily speak to a specific law or anything like that, but it is more of like I guess maybe it was more of like liberty culture kind of thing, where she was critical over, Thomas Massey had tweeted this picture of him and his family posing with their weapons after their Christmas card. I know a lot of libertarians are sharing it around. They're all holding their their AR-15s or whatever it may be. And Lauren had sent this email condemning the card, reminding people saying that many people find guns very scary, kind of suggesting that YAL shouldn't be pushing over messages of people holding a bunch of guns, because the public might not like that, which would seem to kind of contradict the idea of just putting out the correct messaging or what have you. So how would you? And again, I'm not going to try to make you answer for everything Lauren's ever said. You're not her, but again, it speaks to what people might be concerned about the organization overall, if that's the kind of thinking that's going on at the top.
Yeah, that's fair. Totally understood. Yeah, I mean, I love that card. It's one of those things. It's an internal conversation. So she wasn't condemning it. She was essentially saying, let's have a discussion the best way to market the 2A. And she's a lot of people try to look at her as if she's Ron Paul. She's a very collaborative person who's a CEO raising money to help the collaborative organization. So I disagreed with her on that. I've openly disagreed with her on that. A lot of people did, and that was the end of the story. It never turned into anything. So it was one of those moments where she wanted to open a conversation about the messaging on this, and we moved on. I mean, you can see that we're tweeting constantly again about ghost guns, whatever else. I think we have more ghost guns owned in the office than we have staff. So it's one of those things where, and I got that Christmas card as well, and I have it hanging on my fridge because I love it. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's just an internal messaging thing. It's not affecting the exterior of the organization. One of our legislators just passed a federal nullification bill, which would allow people to have machine guns in New Hampshire without being enforced by New Hampshire. So, proof in the pudding type situation. And it was a conversation that was internal that didn't lead to, I mean, we actually doubled down on guns after that. So after we had that conversation, I was like, no, let's continue to move the Overton window and go more hard on it. So it's just, I mean, it's one of those things. And it's like we talk constantly about guns, and I also want to add, like, she was one of the very first public people that I saw immediately after Uvalde shooting, and immediately after the Heartland shooting. Heartland,
Highland, yeah.
Highland. Thank you.
Highland, yeah.
And immediately after the Highland shooting, saying that gun control is not the problems. The problem is that we are treating it. We're putting our kids in target zones, not giving them any type of defense, and then being surprised when it happens. Right. So, she came out strongly, pro gun, pro defense, all that type of stuff immediately after those two. One of the very first public speakers that I saw do that. And I think that was just open from one of those conversations that we've had about, how do we want to handle guns? Like, these are internal conversations we have, right? If like Marc Claire and I were going to talk about what's the best way to phrase this tweet, and we determined, hey, let's make it more hardcore than we initially thought, which is what happens. I don't see an issue with that. We should have those conversations constantly and consider how are we going to grow our movement as a whole, and we have become more hardcore on those things, which is, I think part of the messaging of us wanting to be these guys. It's reversed for me. Yeah, I mean, that's also the same reason we changed the event name. It was originally in 2020 Mobilize 2020. We changed it to Revolution 2021 and 2022. And we came out with the print
Revolution
guns, not
sounds
money.
a little more exciting.
Yeah, exactly. We've been increasing the edge on our messaging a lot from those conversations that are based, and that was just kind of an out of context email that showed the beginning of that conversation. The end of it ended up being, let's be more hardcore. Let's have print guns, not money sweatshirts in the store.
So would you say that there is a lot of room for like lively discussion within YAL when it comes to this stuff? And perhaps I'm just trying to interpret the way I see things. Perhaps Lauren is someone who comes from, I don't really know her full background, but maybe more of that CEO, public relations type mindset. And so perhaps she's always bringing up how how the public might see things and how it might affect YAL's image. Whereas then within that, there's other people who might be advocating, no, we should be more hardcore about this. We should push it this way. Is it more of a back and forth than it might seem from just an email or two or a screenshot or two?
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't want the perception to be that Lauren is pushing it one direction or another. She's very open about that. I mean, like, so like I have full control of like our merch for the most part. So like our merch, like the print guns not money merch. This one is don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. The Matt Kibbe quote. The Revolution branding, the fact that we're putting more and more of like the Delaware crossing type of imagery on our stuff. So like it is very collaborative. She was private industry CEO before this. And even before that, she's been in the liberty movement for like 17 years, though. So she's very much a hardcore libertarian. And the question is, how do we kind of take things forward? So, and I'm afraid of like opening up a little bit of quabbling. Like one more thing I just want to mention, just in terms of elephant in the room, is like I have no issue with like Reed or whatever else. I heard he has a new project coming out, which I'm hoping is. I think I'm excited to see what it is. I think a lot of people can have a large impact in the liberty movement as a whole. Liberty movement needs to remain needs to have several prongs and a lot of people doing different things. Like Mises, for example, I think has a different utility than YAL, and that's a good thing. We need to have multiple. It needs to be decentralized. I think we believe in free market and voluntarism, and that comes with some decentralization of things. So I'm hoping Reed's project does very well. I'm hoping it's a huge push for the liberty movement. I'm excited to see what it is. Sometimes these types of disagreements can blow up and turn into things that are far more than they seem, and and I think that's just one of those situations. So that is kind of how this whole thing kind of boils down, is like we're all Ron Paulers. I dropped out at 19 because Ron Paul was the one who inspired me to become a libertarian, recognize anti-war with this whole China speech, in the sense of, what if China invaded America? And we're continuing to push policy and push the hardcore narrative that you guys seen. Like I can tell you from working here 4 years, our messaging has evolved to be far more hardcore than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't want to make you, check down a list of just having to answer for things that Lauren might have said in an email or what have you. But I think the only other thing I want to bring up is not necessarily related directly to things she said, but I know after Reed departed YAL, there were some people that were brought on that he has brought up as, being somewhat questionable. One of them is this guy, Brendan Steinhauser, that was brought on as, I believe, chief strategy officer. And supposedly he used to be Dan Crenshaw's campaign manager. And, he also has said some somewhat pro-war things. And I've seen some of those tweets that I would personally, not be fairly comfortable with. Again, these are someone's personal tweets, but this is now someone that has power within the organization. And I think the other person that brought on is this guy named Joel Trammell, who he had donated to Bernie Sanders, Medicare for All type Democrat. Again, I don't want to make an answer for every individual person, so I'll just let you sort of broadly address how some of these people have come into the organization, and if people have concerns about their political past and some of the positions they might have supported, or some of the politicians, in the case of the very pro-war Dan Crenshaw, why should they not be concerned, or what could assuage their concerns about those people being involved with YAL?
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, uh, everyone talks about Dan Crenshaw, which when I first talked to Brendan Steinhauser, or when he first talked to the staff first time he's here, which and he's a very new addition. He mentioned in our training room we have all these pictures of every legislator that we've ever gotten elected, and a few of them have these red X taped over them. And like the Stuart Jones example, like I talked about, everybody has these people who flake out on us, and we need to hold them accountable in the future, or hurt them as badly as we can. Brendan described Crenshaw as his red X. He hates Crenshaw. Within the first day of him working here, he posted the Dan Crenshaw like attack graphic on Facebook, going over red flag laws, for example. He thought Crenshaw was going to be much better than he was back in 2018, but he also consulted for Rand Paul, which is, I think, something that a lot of people miss out on. And he worked for Crenshaw before he was in the legislature, before he had an electoral voting record, and now he does have a voting record, and it's very clear that Crenshaw is a squish and an establishment hack. So I think that's just it's one of those things where he's been in the movement for the past 20 some years. He was very early Tea Party stuff, involved in the very early Rand Paul, Thomas Massey pushed through in the early days, helped build up Freedom Works from the ground, back in the mid 2000s or so. So he's kind of an old head in a sense. He's the oldest. Well, I keep joking about old Americans for Liberty around him because he's almost. I'm not going to guess his
Oh
age.
wow, doesn't have the same kind of flow off the tongue kind of thing as YAL does.
OF, yeah. Yeah. Or not OF, OL. Yeah, there you go.
Wall.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's like it's one of those things of like, yeah, he worked for Crenshaw and he hates Crenshaw now, and Crenshaw flaked on him what he thought he was going to be, but he's also worked for a lot of really good people that we're ignoring. And he said he's ready to get out of consulting back into the nonprofit third party game because he wants to jump back into the movement head first in a sense. So, and thus far, I mean, here's the thing: he's in charge of our social medias along with Brandon Williamson. So like if your question like how hardcore he is, look at it. And like another thing, he's also been really pushing some like super pro anti-war people. I forgot his name, but we're about to announce a new speaker for Revolution coming up in the next couple of days, who's an ex special forces person who is now like a hardcore Scott Horton follower. Mentioned that like he felt his time with the Empire is the way he put it as his time in the military. Has left but nothing but waste in terms of money and lives. So it's like, people who've kind of woken up from that. And in terms of like pro-war tweets, when I actually brought one of those up to him because it's like, what the hell is this about? And he's not looking at it that the way that many people interpret it. It was given a bad interpretation. He was taken along the ways of like, yeah, it's bad that Putin is invading Ukraine, not necessarily that NATO or America should step up and fight Putin inside of Ukraine. So, which is, I don't know, it's whatever. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. He's clearly putting up Scott Hortonites at Revolution. We had Scott Horton at Revolution last year as well. So, we are. If that answers your question, feel free to kind of push back on it if I didn't, because I want to be very open and transparent about this stuff because I believe in this stuff. Just at the end of the day, like we are hardcore anti-war people. If you don't believe me, look at the bills. We're our Hazlitt members, and one of our big initiatives next year is going to be Defend the Guard, which is another nullification bill that stops state guards from going to war overseas. In Afghanistan, I think the last year, more than 50% of our troops overseas were people who were directly from state level guards. So we can start to nullify the government's involvement in war in all these other areas by some of these initiatives in which our Hazlitt members are going to be taking up.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty good, and like, I don't want to go on a list of everything that anyone that has worked for YAL has ever said and make you answer for all their tweets and emails. I think that can get pretty tiresome. So I think at the end, people might want to do what I plan to do, which is go to YAL Revolution and literally like meet some of these people, because it is really different. I think one of my favorite parts about podcasting has not been podcasting necessarily. It's been later meeting the people that have followed my podcast or meeting my guests and finding out who they are in real life, which is often a reflection of the person you talk to on a microphone, but it's just not the same. It's just entirely different. So why don't we dive into a little bit more of a preview of YAL Revolution? Obviously, the main event, even though it's not on the last day, the main event will, of course, be myself, along with Reed Coverdale and Clint Russell, talking about how awesome we are at podcasting or whatever our topic may be. But why don't you just break down some of the other big names and some of the, like, I think there's a lot of names that are speaking that people are going to want to see. Obviously, everyone wants to see Dave Smith, but maybe there's some other stuff going on that I don't know as much about that might be another reason to come to this event, like workshops or this sort of thing. So maybe you can dive into a little more of the details of what someone could expect if they actually came for 2 or 3 days to this event in Orlando.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, like one thing you said, like I continue to want people to get involved and just see for themselves. I mean, last year when Ron Paul went on stage, we had over 1,000 students chanting "in the Fed" for so long that he had to wait for to continue through with his speech. And then the same thing happened with Edward Snowden when he went on the big screen. He had to take his earphones out because people were cheering so loud. That you could hear the feedback from his earphones when he took it out. So like, these are the type of kids that are that we're getting here. These are the radicals, and the whole purpose of being there is be radicalized by these big names that have been fighting for liberty for a while. And we keep talking about this concept at YAL of torch bearing, and that's something we really want to drive on in the sense of we need students and the new generation to bear the Ron Paul or the liberty torch. Every generation needs one, right? So from Locke, Thomas Massey to Tubb, I forgot his name. But anyways, on to Barry Goldwater, to Ron Paul, on to Rand Paul, onto the Haslam members or whatever else. Point being is like, we need the new generation of liberty warriors to step up in a bigger way than they have in the past. And at this, we're going to be doing lots of trainings about how to get involved. We're going to talk about the legislative wins we've had, meet some of these Haslam members that have become absolute warriors, and now some are running on to higher office to start to take on the federal level. And then, of course, hear from all the big names, like, some of the names we got: Ron Paul, Rand Paul is going to just tune in virtually, Larry Reed, Dave Smith, Corey DeAngelis, Kennedy, Doug Bandow, Zuby, AK Guy, Brandon Herrera. If you've heard of him, obviously, you guys, Clint Russell, Marc Clair, Reed Coverdale. Spike Cohen's going to be there as well. And we're actually just about to announce this today, but Tulsi Gabbard's going to be there. It's going to be the first event we've ever done with her, so I'm interested in that one because we've never had a Democrat before. So, I'm very
that's
interested.
One that's going to have mixed views, because there's going to be the libertarians that are like, sweet, Tulsi Gabbard, she's anti-war, I love her. There's going to be the other libertarians that are like, Tulsi Gabbard, this just proves that you're going left because you're bringing on a progressive. So just what's the idea behind someone why does someone like Tulsi Gabbard to you fit into an event like YAL Revolution, which isn't necessarily about political party per se?
Yeah, she's not a libertarian, first of all. Like, I would not call her a liberty person, but she has become pretty good on COVID. She has opposed the left. She has opposed a lot of this trans stuff in the sense of, the progressive movement on kids and schools or whatever else. She's been anti-war forever, especially when the Democrats went pro-war. She's been anti-war in Ukraine. We're going to have her talk on an anti-war subject. It's one of those things where we can utilize different people and different pieces, right? Like Ron DeSantis isn't a libertarian either. A lot of libertarians love Ron DeSantis who don't like Tulsi Gabbard. Ron DeSantis is good on a few things. He's not good on war. He's not good on speech, right? He's tried to push several bills that have stifled speech, even though it's left-wing speech and protests or whatever else. But he's been good on other things. So I'm excited to see it. And trust me, I'm aware the Twitter's probably gonna be mad about it, but I don't really care. I want to see what she has to say. I'm excited to see someone from the left becoming anti-war while everybody else becomes on the left goes pro-war. So that's one reason we're going to have her. It's the only time we've never had her before, so it's one of those unique ones. You got to throw a few. We can't just create an echo chamber of all these extreme Mises people, and that's like the type of person I am, which is why we have Ron Paul there and all the others and Dave Smith. But at the same time, excited to see what some other people say. Oh, and Glenn Jacobs. I always love Glenn Jacobs and Bruce Penn.
Oh, Glenn's going to be there? That's awesome. I can hopefully finally meet Glenn. I've talked to him a couple of times, and I've never had the opportunity to be frightened by how large he is in person. So I'm excited about that. So if you want to see Glenn Jacobs, Tulsi Gabbard, Dave Smith, me, Clint Reed, any of these people, come on out to YAL Revolution. Dan, I'll let you get the final word. How should people go get tickets? What's the best way to book themselves up for this event?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had over 2,000 some hundred people apply for the event. It's invite only, so you can apply to be invited at yliberty.org/revolution.
Oh, I feel so special now.
I know. Well, and you're invited to speak, so that's even a higher level, But yeah, we only got like 100 some seats left, so we're selling out pretty quickly. Last year we completely sold out. We're always capping at about 1,000. So excited to see anybody else come up. We've been talking on some of these other podcasts and getting some of these new names, like Dave Smith. First time he's coming too. because we want to see some new faces. Like I said, this is where people get radicalized. This is where we're teaching them to be the people who make the change that they want to see in terms of, liberty inside their own community. So I'm excited to see some new faces there. Excited to get some people outside of our own little grassroots activists. So that's all I got. YALiberty.org/revolution.
All right, well, I'm excited to see those faces. I'm excited to be one of those faces. I'm excited to meet you
Yeah.
and shake your hand in person too, Dan. So I will see you there. Keep up the great work. We'll see you in Orlando.
Thanks, Marc.
Live long and live free and live free and live free and live free.